Okay, just put it in your pocket.
Hello. Hi. Okay, it's beautiful that we had a lot of sharing today, especially the first two. Yours was also lovely, thank you. But the reason why I refer to their sharings was because they shared about their mom. Today our session's about Mary, my mother. Okay. Now we're going to relook at our relationship with Mary. Yeah. And now all of us have had an encounter with Mary in some way, or we've kind of touched something about Mary. We maybe have said our family rosary together and prayers have been answered. Maybe some of us have gone for pilgrimages and we've encountered Mary there. I remember Lourdes very fondly. But the one I like very nice is the one in the car. You know the one in the car? Which is the one in the car? The rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. Yeah? Wake up in the morning, open the door, sign of the cross, kiss the rosary, and off we go. Maybe say a prayer. And as we go, a gentle soul decides to cut across in a not so gentle way. And then we let the guy or girl have it again in a not so gentle way. And as soon as that's over, take the rosary and kiss it. Thank you, Mama, for protecting me. Yeah? Now, nothing wrong with that, but just this is who we are. This is what we know about Mary. And she does protect us. So, some of us could be like Scott Hahn. Any of us have heard of Scott Hahn here? Scott Hahn, okay, good. Scott Hahn, was a Protestant pastor who converted to Catholicism, came back to the Catholic Church, and today is one of the greatest preachers or defenders of the Catholic faith. Greatest. Amazing books he's written. Lord Have Mercy, and he's written books on the sacrament, on Mary. We're going to play a little audio, which is an incident in his life. Listen up carefully, because he's got the American accent or whatever. But just listen to this audio.
I'd like to tell you about a story, one that happened to me when I was around 15 years old. Not even 2 years old in my spiritual life. What I lacked in wisdom, I made up for in zeal. I was a very zealous convert, sharing my faith with everyone who would listen, and others too. And I also had a great deal of hostility towards Marian doctrine and devotion. That was how I had been schooled in the faith, and so that is how I shared my faith. But this story doesn't really relate directly to my spiritual life or my attitude toward Mary. But it happened around that same time I was discovering the faith. I was around 15 years old. I was sitting there in my home room in high school when suddenly I began to feel the rumblings of a stomach bug. Well, I knew where I had to go, and I ended up in the nurse's office just a few minutes later. She took my temperature. I was spiking a fever, so she ordered me to lie down, and she called my mother. The next thing I remember was waking up myself and looking up and seeing this pitiful expression of maternal solicitude, looking down, and my mom saying, "Oh, Scotty, it's time to go home. It's time to take you home." And as she was helping me up, and as I was getting my coat on, I heard a very ominous sound, the first period bell. I knew what it meant. All my friends were suddenly about to be walking down the hall when I would be walking down the hall with my mother. And so dutifully, I followed her out of the nurse's office and began walking down the hall. And I leaned forward and I said, "Mom, do you mind walking in front of me?" And as a mother, she complied, and she began to walk about 10 or 15 steps in front of me until we got out the door and into the parking lot, and I caught up with her, got into the car, went home, and spent the day in bed. I forgot about the whole thing. I assumed she did. Apparently she didn't. My dad got home. I heard the rumblings of their conversation downstairs. A short moment later, he opened the door. He asked how I was. I said, fine. And then he stepped in. He wasn't a believer at the time. He was still struggling as an agnostic. But I remember what he said to me. He said, Scotty, your religion doesn't mean a thing if it's all talk. And I wasn't sure what he was talking about. And then he said, you have to think more about the way you treat people. And then came the clincher. He looked at me and he said, don't ever be ashamed to be seen with your mother. And he turned around and he walked out. And I didn't need anybody to explain it to me. I knew exactly what he was referring to me. He was referring to that episode earlier in the day, and suddenly, instead of being ashamed of my mother, I felt ashamed of my shame. But as I look back on that episode many, many years later, not only do I realize how wise my father was and how wrong I was, but how common that sort of affliction is, not only for adolescents with their natural mothers. They're so tough. They want to be seen as cool. They want to be independent. And so the last person they want their friends to see them with is their mother. But there is a spiritual analogy, because in the supernatural life, I think we run into spiritual adolescence where many men and women find themselves feeling a little bit ashamed of being seen with their spiritual mother in the family of God.
Any of us identify with that incident? You all got the incident? Basically was ashamed of his mom in school. I too remember feeling that when she came to school one day. Oh goodness, everyone's going to see with my mom. Anyways. But so this is where we could be at, guys. And some of us may have a devotion to Our Lady. But if we really want to understand who Mary is and what is her purpose for us, we got to look at her from the eyes of the person who made her. Yeah? We got to look at her from the eyes of God. Now, hopefully that would put an end to anything that we have in our minds that's not clear on Mary. So now I have a trick question for you all. Ready? Who made Mary? You're not supposed to answer.
I was not listening to your session.
Okay. But that's right. God made Mary. A tricky question, huh? You don't get any chocolate anyways. Okay. So God made Mary. Yeah? Correct? Everyone agrees to that, no? Okay. Listen to what Saint Louis de Montfort says about Mary. This is thrilling. He said God made one world for the wayfarers. That is this world we are living in. That is where for us. Made one world for the wayfarers. He made another world called paradise for the blessed. That is Pope John Paul and all those guys are there. Yeah? Blessed Mother Teresa, come. So he made one world for the wayfarers. He made a second world, paradise, for those who are blessed. Padre Pio, all the saints are there. And he made a third world for himself. And he called it Mary. He made a third world for himself. And he called it Mary. A place where he lived. Now check this out. I have another question for you. What is your deepest identity? Deepest identity. Identity. Who are you? Anyone? I'm expecting answers. What is your deepest identity? Huh? Sorry? Gender. You're a girl. Okay, yes. Slightly deeper than that. You're a girl, I'm a boy. I am me. Okay, deeper than that. Arre, that's for you. She's having a chocolate biscuit anyways. But that's what I was looking for. I am a child of God. And all of us are children, okay? Your daughter, son, all of us are children of God. Now, who was Mary? Mary was the daughter of God the Father, correct? Yeah? She was the mother of God the Jesus. And she was the spouse of God the Holy Spirit. Now, Sandra may not like this, but I wouldn't want my wife to be my mother, daughter, and wife. But God chose Mary to be everything to Him. Every relationship that He could have with a woman, He chose Mary, no one else. If He wanted, He could have put Jesus just there. But no, He chose Mary. There was no creature that existed that was as close to God as Mary, not even Joseph, because he was not flesh and blood. Jesus didn't share His flesh and blood. So Mary was daughter, spouse, and mother. The depth of the relationship is something, a mystery for us. So if God needed Mary so much, or rather, if God chose Mary for Himself, where are our questions? Who are we to question Mary's role? I mean, God decided, Khatam. So who are we? So where do all our questions come from? If God wanted Jesus, like I said earlier, He could have put Jesus